at least probably 30 million people in the United States who have some baccalaureate credits but have
Hmm.
not completed. So we're trying to reach out to those folks. It's hard sometimes to convince people to go back to school because they may have spent 10 years in a job that they love and they think, well, why should I go back? But it's increasingly, if you look at the data, it's still true that folks with a baccalaureate degree in 10 years out are doing better in terms of salary and income.
Hello and welcome to all our guests, listeners from all over the world. Welcome to EDU Unlocked with me, Ashish Fernando. Our goal at this podcast is not just to meet people from institutions. Our goal here is to meet leaders who are inspirational and who are making a change, not just at their own institution, but they're actually helping the whole ecosystem of education and, most importantly, the student get to where they deserve to be. And joining us today is one such amazing, inspirational personality. We have Dr. Beth Martin, who's the 19th president of Notre Dame de Namur University, or NDNU, joining us. Thank you, Beth, for joining us today on our podcast.
Thank you for inviting me and thank you for that very nice introduction.
Now, well, there's more. I want to tell our listeners a little more about you because, rarely do I meet, um, especially presidents of institutions who've had sort of a full circle journey, and you're such a person, and so I need to tell that to our listeners about Beth's full circle story, where she began her whole career in academia as a faculty member and as a program director for the counseling psychology program, later became the founding dean of NDNU's School of Sciences, and then she returned in 2021 to actually become the president of NDNU. And that talks a lot about how much you actually know your institution, because you've actually been there for a long time in multiple different roles. Does that help you? I'm sure, like when you have to make a decision, you go back to the time when you were faculty or you were the dean and doing something. Tell us how that's helping you in your life today.
Well, that's a really good question. So thanks for asking it. It absolutely helps because, as you know, I often do get questions from both faculty and deans. And having been a faculty member and a dean as well, it certainly does help. It depends on what the issue is, but I can generally um, recall similar issues when I was in those positions. And it helps me to walk deans through difficult situations that I went through myself, and the same with faculty. And I also believe that I understand faculty perspective better than I might have had I never been a faculty member myself. And I also, I really appreciate having had the classroom experience and that kind of interaction with students.
That's lovely. When you started there, did you and when you looked at the president's office and you were working there and you were teaching, did it kind of strike you at that point that you actually see yourself growing and leading this institution, or it kind of fell in place? Like, tell us a
Oh,
story.
no, well, I actually never anticipated I'd wind up in this position.
Mm.
When I was a graduate student in psychology at Stanford, we were trained really to be researchers. And that's what I did for several years before becoming a faculty member. And as you mentioned, NDNU was the first institution where I began to teach. And there were many evolutions along the way. I was asked. I had a license as a psychologist, as a experimental psychologist in the state of California. And because I was licensed, my clinical chair said, well, I'd like you to supervise our students. we need more faculty who can help supervise. And I said, well, really, I can't do that because I wasn't trained as a clinician. I was trained as an experimental psychologist. And she said, well, then go back and get retrained. So I actually did. So then I wound up doing more than a year of retraining to become a clinical psychologist and open a clinical practice, because you had to have a practice if you were going to supervise psych students in clinical settings. So that was something I had never intended to do either. So now I've had, two different careers. And then after 5 years, the provost asked if I would apply for the position of founding dean. And I had not thought of going into administration before that. So I did, and I received the job, and I wound up that I loved it. And it was very new. I had a colleague who was also a founding dean of arts and sciences. We helped each other learn. And it was very exciting. And bringing a group of disparate faculty together in the school was a lot of fun and very educational, because we had all kinds of sciences. We had natural sciences, we had computer science and math and social science, psychology and sociology, political science. So it was very innovative. And I just loved it. So then that was really the first time I thought administration is something that I think I enjoy.
That's amazing. Would you say, if I were to ask you and thank you for that story, by the way, and if I ask you in your role as president, what would be the one part of your presidency that you really enjoy? Would you say administration?
I think maybe the one part I enjoy the most may go all the way back to my training in graduate school to be a research scientist. Is I love gathering data from all the different constituencies, and then making a decision, not a vacuum. You're making it with the data, and also with I have a tremendous team, a tremendous cabinet. And I listen to all of their opinions, and then I'm the one that has to make the final decisions. And I like knowing that it's an informed decision.
Yeah, because you trust the people in the cabinet, and that's such a big strength to have. Being able to delegate trust and authority in making decisions and then helping make that decision. I love that. I love
And
that.
of course, now we have artificial intelligence too, so we can get a lot of data much more quickly. And we have a terrific institutional research.
Yeah. So now you have one chair at the table is for ChatGPT.
Now it is.
Right? That's funny. That's amazing. Now, I've done my double masters. My family's been big on education. My grandfather started 7 schools, and that's why I'm in education. And I always say grad is the new undergrad. And there's a lot of push since you've come as president. There's been this kind of directional sort of not change, but focus on graduate degree programs. How do you see that new face of NDNU, where you see the institution going? Tell us a little bit about that.
That's actually a very interesting story. When I was approached in 2021 to see if I would throw my hat in the ring for this position, and I decided, yes, I would come and interview, the Board of Trustees had already made the decision to close the traditional undergraduate residential programs. So that had been going on for 100 years on this site. And so it was an enormous change. So I knew that before coming here, that the idea was to focus primarily on graduate programs and also degree completion. So when I arrived in September of 2021, the undergraduate programs had already been closed. So I knew from the get-go that our goal was to increase our graduate programs and to build our traditional degree completion programs. But the main difference that we see, is that we're serving what we call the post-traditional student. So the traditional 18-year-old who would go to a residential college, of course, we're not addressing any longer because those programs were closed. But what we find is that we are attractive to students who are on the average age of 35. They're working, they have families, and they're looking for not only advancing in their careers, but they're looking for a way to do it conveniently that doesn't disadvantage either their families or their jobs. So we have spent the last 3 years putting as many of our on-ground programs online. We have a fabulous Center for Excellence in Teaching and Learning, which is staffed by 5 instructional designers, one of whom is the director. And those instructional designers have done a phenomenal job working with faculty, moving their on-ground courses to online. We still have on-ground, and we will always have on-ground in particular for those degrees that are clinical, because they're licensure programs and they need supervision and education. So we will always have the option of having some on-ground programs, but we're increasingly moving online. And that's very attractive, as you probably know, to people who are extremely busy.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, I mean, I work with some institutions here also locally in Salt Lake, like Western Governors.
Mm.
When you started speaking about it, like I was trying to connect the dots here. Absolutely. I love the fact that you can now be studying online as a working adult, hopefully helps your career progression, comes at a lower cost because you save on the cost of a traditional like on-campus education. Absolutely love it. And so I'm guessing because that's the demographic you're focused on, so it makes sense to go online as well as more focus on grad rather than undergrad.
But interestingly enough, though, our degree completion programs, at the moment we have a degree completion in business and one in psychology. They're also fully online because those students are students who've been out of school typically several years and haven't completed. There are many millions. I keep getting different estimates, but at least probably 30 million people in the United States who have some baccalaureate credits but have not completed. So we're trying to reach out to those folks. It's hard sometimes to convince people to go back to school because they may have spent 10 years in a job that they love and they think, well, why should I go back? But it's increasingly, if you look at the data, it's still true that folks with a baccalaureate degree in 10 years out are doing better in terms of salary and income. And also, strangely enough, well, maybe it isn't so strange, but there's a longer lifespan for folks who have a baccalaureate degree.
Interesting.
It may be because they're trained to critically analyze data or live a healthy lifestyle. I don't know the answer to that, but
yeah.
I guess what I'm trying to say, as opposed to a lot of the sentiment that's now in our country, is that higher education is absolutely critical. It's critical to develop the whole person. It's critical for us to develop a well-informed citizenry, to support our democracy, to give back to our communities. It's not just to move ahead in your career.
Oh, 100% agree. I mean, when I see the declining enrollment rates over a decade and just kind of how that trajectory is showing up, it gets a little concerning because I feel like traditional education, and now even though it's online, but considering some parts of traditional education in the online module is so much more important than saying, oh, I'm not even gonna get a bachelor's degree. I'm just gonna go get a job and then build my skills. And I think a lot of people have sort of distorted that, image of higher education by saying, yeah, now there's stackable skills and like being able to do all of that. We're not really there yet. We're not able to identify skills within a job and be able to stack them together and say, hey, this is equal to having a bachelor's degree. So there's just so much value to a regular standard education. Absolutely agree with you. in all of that, we have definitely have some listeners who are looking at the leadership at institutions, right, as a trajectory for them. So talking about careers, but within your space and where you've got to, what would be one piece of advice you have for people who are in higher ed looking to get into leadership roles and hopefully, become the president of a school in the future? I'd love to hear from you.
I think that there are more training programs available now than there used to be. I was fortunate enough to be part of several AALI, which is aligned with Academic Search, is a program that trains people who think they might want to be presidents in a variety of things. You're exposed to other presidents, you're exposed to some of the educational institutions nationally, like the Council of Independent Colleges, National Association of Public Independence. A variety of folks come to train you about what it's like to run athletics, what it's like to run an advancement. So I would recommend that they look to their supervisors to recommend them for these programs. A bunch of them have sprung up, and ACE,
Yeah.
Ted Mitchell, who is president, and they have programs for training folks to go into leadership positions. I think it's very much an evolution. I don't think it's something that you can decide overnight, this is something I want. In fact, I'll mention that I did actually go to a vocational training. Is this vocation actually for you? And it was with a large group of other folks who thought they might want to be presidents, but it made us really consider and think through, given what it really means to be a president and the kinds of tasks that you'll have to do and the kinds of challenges you'll face, is this really something for you? And that was helpful too. So I would recommend getting as much exposure and training as possible. Now, traditionally, for many, many years, presidents tended to come up through the traditional academic pipeline. So you would be a faculty member, then perhaps a department chair, then a provost, which was the route that I took. And that's still largely the way it's going. But as you probably know, about 10 years ago, there was a push to hire folks from other industries. So presidents from business and finance were hired to be in some presidencies. But the traditional path is still usually through academia. And I would say the reason for that, one of the reasons for that is not only because you know what the industry really is like because you've been in it. But also I believe that there's more trust in a president who has been through the ranks. So faculty are more likely to want to work with a president who knows what their situation is because they've been there than somebody who's never been in academia.
Totally agree. Yeah. I see some schools where, somebody from like the tech industry came in as president and suddenly wants to change the dynamic of the institution, and faculty and staff and the senior level are so confused as to where to go. And so I totally get what you're saying. But these are all helpful tips for people who want to understand if a presidency is good for them.
One other that I just recalled, at some point someone said to me, if you're going to be a president, remember you're always faculty. And that's really, really true.
Yeah.
Because students only come for their education, for the faculty.
Yeah.
So you always have to keep that mindset in the forefront. We're here for the student, and the student is here for the faculty.
Love it. Love it. In the end, it's all for the student. It's the student experience that we're here for. So a quick question on that. You've been in this industry for so long on the teaching side as a president, and you've met countless, numerous students, and you look at them on a daily basis, right? I mean, you have the faculty and the administration, but it's all about what value you're giving them. So what is the one thing that you've learned from students over time? And is there something that you see that's changed in the way today's students learn and how institutions need to look at students today versus, when you probably started like 15, 20 years ago? Is there a difference?
Well, I think I early on, you and I were talking about what drew me to come back full circle. And I have to say that it's the mission of our institution. Notre Dame de Namur has always put social justice first and the development of the whole student and inclusivity. So I would say that what I see in our students that has remained constant is their level of appreciation for the fact that they feel that we have helped them become their true selves and that they have grown while they're here, in addition to understanding their field of specialization. So we're all about not just producing an MBA who's going to be a fabulous manager in business, but somebody who's going to bring ethics into the workplace, and somebody who's going to be caring about their direct reports and the lives of the people they work with, and also how much they're contributing to their community. I don't think that's changed. In fact, I remember being here over 20 years ago, and we kept being told that that was one of the things that students appreciated most about us. And we're continuing to be told that by our graduates, that was the support of the faculty, how much they cared about the individual student, in addition to making sure that the academic quality was high. And we hear that quite a bit. And so that hasn't changed for us. And I think it probably hasn't changed for other institutions like us. I think what has changed, as you brought up, is the public press that keeps telling individuals you don't need an education. What you need are particular credentials that you can stack. Now, it's definitely true in the tech industry that you can certainly get very high-paying jobs with the training that you get from your company or particular stackable credentials. But then it leaves out the piece of developing the whole person and your understanding of community and democracy and citizenry.
100%. Thank you for that. Very helpful. With all of this, we talked about staff, the institution, students. Do you ever get to not think about all this and unwind? Do you ever unwind?
I'll be honest and say, actually, no, it's a 24/7 job.
Yeah.
So I think that's something you have to understand. And if you don't, you certainly learn it very quickly.
Yeah. Yeah. But relentless, even like holidays or whatever, you're always thinking institution, right?
And you're always on call, of course.
And you're always on it. Yeah.
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 Right.
So there's some fire somewhere that people want to call you and ask how to put out.
Yeah.
That's
Well, of course, I do believe in self-care. I'm not saying that it's healthy to be a workaholic. So you certainly try for those, but you're always on call.
Yeah, sure. All right. Well, let's ask some really light questions. I like to do kind of like a rapid fire, very simple questions. What's one thing on campus that actually makes it feel like home to you?
Well, I would say it's the willingness of faculty, students, and staff to spend time with one another when we don't all, they're not common events, but when we have the opportunity to have holiday parties or to have, we hold a cabinet coffee every month where we invite everybody to come and talk about whatever they like to talk about, ask whatever questions they have. And then we have every other month or so, we have a community forum where we all gather for lunch and talk about different topics. I think that makes it feel like home, that we really care about each other.
That's a great answer. Yeah, love it. Love it. And I'm sure the people love it. If they're sharing thoughts, sharing food at the same time, it should be great. Awesome. If Is there any person or book who's influenced your leadership style? Anybody you like your go-to in terms of how you operate?
Well, I have to say that I've been very fortunate through my career having role models and having mentors.
Hmm.
So I would say most of the people I have worked for and reported to have been excellent role models, and I hope I've taken little bits and pieces of all of their leadership styles, learning what works and learning what doesn't work over the years from presidents I've worked for provosts I've worked for. I think they've been, and many of them I've stayed in touch with. So I very much appreciate their mentorship.
I'm glad you mentioned it because I mean, as a leader of an organization, I feel people think, yeah, we know exactly what to do and how to do it, but the value of a mentor in building a leadership style is just so important. I mean, I thank my luck for the mentors I've had in life from whom I've learned, whom I can go to and just bounce ideas off of. So absolutely, good to know that. Is there
I should
one?
also,
Yeah,
oh, I'm
sorry.
sorry, I should also mention, I think I mentioned a little earlier, the Council of Independent Colleges, of Independent Private Colleges, has just recently had a convention just for presidents. And we get to ask each other, how did you do that? Or
Yeah.
I'm in this situation now too. How did you get through that? And so we have a forum where we can connect with each other. And if you have a particular problem that is really thorny, you will get answers from other presidents nationally. So it's very helpful.
That's amazing. I mean, peer feedback, yeah, nothing like it. Because a lot of times you'll probably hear, yeah, oh, we had exactly the same challenge, and here's what we did. And then you learn from whether they got it right or got it wrong. Either way, yeah, absolutely. That's amazing. Um, what's uh, what's one hobby or interest of Beth that people generally don't know about?
Well, I guess I'd have to say, people probably don't know. At one point, I raised livestock, and I'm very interested in the natural world and nature, and I spend as much time in nature as I can. And so, I've raised dogs, I've raised alpacas, I've had horses, and so
Wow.
it's a huge contrast actually between my work and I think it's people don't wouldn't realize that, but
That's
it's not
interesting.
something I'm involved in at the moment. But
At the moment. Yeah. Would you like to go back to that, like maybe after retirement or something?
I would actually, I'm thinking about that. Yeah,
That's pretty amazing. All right, amazing. One piece of advice that you've received that's kind of stuck along with you all the time.
I think at NDNU we have the Sisters of Notre Dame's hallmarks of an educational institution, many of which are outstanding. One of them, I think that I've learned that drives me is wherever you are, you should attempt to build community. Wherever you are, that includes being inclusive and and respecting the individuality and character of others, no matter how different they are. So I guess the overarching thing to say would be it's important to build community. You can't work um, isolated.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. In fact, just yesterday I was at a YPO meeting, a Young Presidents Organization, which is kind of like CEOs in Salt Lake coming together, and it was so interesting and actually not so surprising when I look at it now that when people were having conversations, these are all CEOs of successful companies, tech startups, real estate, but there was very little discussion on business. There was way more conversations on like mental health, how are we doing, how are our families coping up with us, and it almost felt like therapy, right? Uh, uh, and I was really like uh, looking at that and thinking like a lot of leaders, they're just day to day involved in so much business. That community even though it's not a business, it's a business community, but all these other talks that we can have, it felt good. And it's the same, I think, internally as well, with employees. We try to do our best. And from what you've been telling me, you've been doing a lot with just trying to bring them together as a group. That's amazing. Great.
I will say, I think that all of us have found, and I'm not just talking about our institution, but others, because I've spoken to a lot of other presidents, we're still finding that COVID has had an impact. So in other words, it's not just over. There's still lingering effects. And I think that some of the enrollment issues and some of the, do I really need to go to college? Has been heightened by the fact that there was a lockdown for so long, and students their normal day-to-day was taken away from them. And so they've been reevaluating, what is it that I really want to do? What is it that I really need to do? And so we're still feeling those effects. It hasn't gone away.
Yeah, yeah, I totally agree. Yeah. Is there anything post-COVID? So I'm sure y'all went online and it started the whole thing for you about like going online during COVID. What would be one lesson you learned from COVID? One thing that you'd definitely keep going forward, and maybe one thing that you'll get rid of.
Well, one thing that I think we'll definitely keep is having having staff work remotely part of the time, because everybody became used to that flexibility and how productive they could actually be, not being in their office. We can't do that. Of course, everybody who's student facing can't do that, but to a large degree, many of our staff at least have partial remote work. I think that will last. What wouldn't I do? I would never have 100% remote, because we need the community. That's much harder to build community. Although we are trying, as one of our faculty said, to reach through the screen and create community with folks who are remote and for one reason or another can't be here. So we're always trying to do that. I don't know that we've solved it or figured it out, but
it's a hard one. Yeah.
Yeah.
You kind of have to balance it. Yeah.
We missed the water cooler talk, all of us, I think.
Yeah, it's so important. I mean, as humans, we realized during COVID, we actually realized, especially like I as a founder, I thought, oh, life is going to be remote going forward. We don't need large offices. And then you realize how people either don't realize that they're missing the human connection, and that's actually increasing their mental stress, or they're becoming lazier. It's one of the two. Yeah, and so hybrid is what we're also going for. Let's talk a little bit. We're almost at time, but I'd like to talk a little bit about the future. Is there any piece of new technology? Let's keep ChatGPT outside because that's typically what everybody goes for. One piece of technology that you've seen in let's say the last decade, you've seen that kind of revolutionize how we impart education at an institution.
Well, if we're going to leave artificial intelligence out, I would say, which I think is going to have a huge impact. I would say learning management systems. Those are the software systems that we use to actually enable our students to do online work. So learning management systems have become very sophisticated, and so have allowed us now to create online courses that have as much integrity and excitement as face-to-face. It's different, it's not the same, but they are very, I think our faculty who have taught face-to-face for many, many years, who have now been experimenting with how to do fully online with the kinds of supports a learning management system gives them, are very surprised at how how rich those courses can be.
Understood. And then going to AI, do you think AI will change education the way we operate for the good?
I do personally, I do. And I have a funny uh, vision in my head. I keep thinking back to my dissertation days when you spend your life in the library hunting rare references and pulling books and hours trying to gather all your references and keep them organized. And now I think, well, that's what AI will do.
Hmm.
So they have access to much more data, much more quickly. So their research can be in greater depth. And I think that's going to be true for medicine, for engineering. I think that we'll have access to be able to accomplish certain kinds of research much more quickly than we might have in the past. I'm looking forward to a lot of healthcare breakthroughs. Um, I have a lot of confidence that it's a resource for us, that it's something that's it'll be driven by human beings. It'll be driven by our students, but it will be a resource for them.
I love it. I'm sort of in the same bucket. Yeah, I think there's so much value, and speed is, I think, the one thing it gives us as humans is to be able to get to that promised land much quicker. Love it. Any final thoughts on the future in terms of where we're all headed in education and the way universities operate? Would love to hear from you on where you think maybe fast forward, 10 years from now.
Fast forward 10 years from now, I have a lot of hopes, of course. I do believe that universities will have to learn to be more flexible. There used to be a lot of jokes for the last decades about how glacially slowly higher ed moves. That we can't do that anymore. We're not. We have to move quickly now. And I think we will continue to move more and more quickly to absorb change in the world and to be able to expose our students to it in the right way, not go back 30 years and no more sage on the stage, as they say. So, and the other piece of the future that I think will happen. The other piece of the future that I hope will happen is a recognition, a realization that education is the only tool we have to improve our future. Our children are our hopes, and training our children, not just in higher ed, but K through 12 and then higher ed. That's how we improve our world. That's how we solve our problems. Everybody's very concerned about climate change. I am very concerned about climate change. I believe that education is eventually going to create solutions for us. It may not happen right away, but I do think education is our only tool. And also, education is the only thing that can never be taken away from us.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I love the way you concluded that education is the tool. Um, I feel, in the end, really good research for all these other industries comes from education, right? Higher ed, like a lot of research we do, but a lot of that research doesn't translate for our own industry. And you rightly said it, like a lot of people think we're moving at a glacial pace. So I'm hopeful, just like you, that in the next decade we change that. And thank you for that hope, and thank you for all these wonderful answers you gave to our questions. I'm sure our listeners going to enjoy that and reach out to you, I think, in one way or the other, to learn more. So thank you
Well,
so
I want to thank you. I really enjoyed this, and it was also nice of you to invite me to join you.
Fabulous. Yes, and thank you to all our listeners for joining another wonderful episode of EDU Unlocked with me, Ashish Fernando, and our amazing guest for today, Dr. Beth Martin from Notre Dame, Namur. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ashish.